Kyle Klingman with Track Wrestling. We're going way south. We're going to Louisiana. Ryak Finch. He is head wrestling coach at Bayou Elite Wrestling Club, an assistant at Holy Cross, two-time NAIA champion for Grandview University. Ryak Finch, how are you?
I'm great, man. How are you? Thank you for having me.
I appreciate this. And when you think of your kind of trajectory, Arizona, Iowa, Louisiana, did you ever think this was the route you would go geographically?
Never, never. I was telling somebody a few weeks ago when I've heard about Louisiana when I was younger, it's almost like a place that you think it isn't around anymore. You know what I mean? It's a historic place that I never even visited, and kind of sight unseen when I got the opportunity to come down here. I was like, man, New Orleans, right? How could you find a cooler city? And as soon as I got down here, that's exactly what it was. I mean, it's just the people are amazing. The food is great. I mean, the history. It's hard to find a town where you go to these buildings, right? And you have 3, 4, 500-year-old buildings, in America. There's not a lot of places that are like that. So it's a real blessing to be here.
You started at Iowa State. You were a national qualifier there. Why Iowa State?
So there was also always kind of an Arizona to Iowa State connection. Growing up, I did some summertime training at Sunnyside High School. The Galax are from there. Eric Larkin is from there. A few other people that have kind of made that jump from Sunnyside to college. And so that's where I did a lot of my freestyle training. And so I grew up watching Nate and Nick, and I would go to Tucson and those guys would be in the room training. Nick would be back from college Nate would be back from college in the room. Nick would be there. And then one of my freestyle coaches, actually a major freestyle coach, was RBY's grandpa, Mike Bravo. And so when the recruiting process started, it was the team that I was always rooting for already, watching Nate and Nick, watching Nate win his national championship. It was always right there in the front of my mind as far as schools I wanted to compete for. So then once I visited, you know what I mean, and got to meet the coaches, I saw Ames. You see how much, they love wrestling in that area, especially in Iowa. It just seemed like it was a great fit, and it was where I wanted to be from the beginning.
And then why Iowa State to Grandview?
So really after when I was leaving Iowa State, Grandview wasn't really even on my radar at first. To be honest, I was ready to pack it up. I was going to head home, back to Arizona and see what I could do there. I actually got a Twitter DM from Jimmy Schuessler, who was a national champ at Grandview too, and just an animal. I don't know if you know who that guy is, but just a beast, a great leader, someone that you always want to be teammates with. And he was basically just like, hey man, just give it a chance, come check it out. And this was in August already, so it was kind of late in the process to transfer. And so I was a little skeptical, but it was only 30 minutes away from Ames. It was an easy trip to go make, you know what I mean? And once I met Coach Mitchell and Coach Reedy, and I met all the guys, and actually at that time, we were still in the small room, so we didn't have that huge, state-of-the-art facility. So the first practice I was in, I walk into this small 1.5 space and guys are just right on top of each other, just beating the hell out of one another. You know what I mean? It was pushing each other, scrapping, screaming. It was just a really high intense. It was the room that I was always kind of used to growing up, right? That was the kind of room that I grew up in. So, as soon as I was there and I met the coaches, it's just, I knew that that's where I needed to be.
Interesting how this works out. You're at Holy Cross now as an assistant. And so think about how this worked. Jim Miller was the coach at Wartburg. He coached Nick Mitchell. Nick Mitchell's at Grandview. Nick Mitchell coached you. TJ Miller, Jim Miller's son, coached at Holy Cross. Now you're at Holy Cross. So there's this circle of influence that's happening all around the sport that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's always so cool how small of a world it is, right? So yeah, like you said, Miller to Mitchell to me, and then Miller to Keller to Landon Williams. So Landon Williams, he was a 2-time national champ for Wartburg. He was actually the first one that called me about this job. So at the time, I was coaching in California, and I was in Orange County, and we had seen each other at tournaments, Tulsa, things like that. And I recognized him just because we were competing at the same time. You know what I mean? He was actually, I think we graduated high school the same year too. So we had known who each other was. I never really met him, but when I got the call, I was either going to move to Atlanta to coach with Omi at Life, or I was going to come here. So I was kind of back and forth on the fence. And there was just something pulling me to the city of New Orleans, you know, and it was just a place that I thought it seemed so cool to live there. It just seemed like a really big opportunity. So really sight unseen, as soon as Landon called me and said to come check the place out, I was like, man, you know what? Just get me a one-way ticket. I'm on my way, you know, let's get it rolling. And from that point on, he had already had Bayou Elite in a pretty good place. Holy Cross is in a good place, like you said. TJ Miller was here a few years prior to him. And so it was just a great opportunity that I kind of ran with.
Tell us about Bayou Elite Wrestling Club. Is that a standalone facility? Do you use the wrestling room? Tell us about that situation you're in.
So we kind of do a little bit of both, right? So we have our own facility. It's about 15 minutes away from the school. So that's really good. It's kind of crazy. So in New Orleans, or I guess all of Louisiana, but especially New Orleans, it's really private and Catholic school driven, right? And the rivalries between these schools down here, it's something that if you're not from here, it's kind of hard to wrap your mind around, because it's 200-year-old rivalries. You know, these schools have been around since they were monasteries, basically, and competing with each other, you know. So you have third, fourth, fifth generation Holy Cross men, right? Or Brother Martin men or Jesuit men that get in them. You're going to be hard pressed to get them to step into a Holy Cross room, right? It doesn't matter who you have coaching. So the main thing that we were trying to do was make an unattached club, right? We wanted everyone to feel welcome. We didn't matter what school you went to. Our goal was to make sure that the state of Louisiana had the best guys in the room, you know, training together, had the best coaches we could get all in there. And it actually, I mean, it turned into something. It was really cool. We had guys, I mean, I remember one time we were in there coaching a practice, and I think we had 8 state champions in there one time for a summer practice that were guys in there training together. So I think we've done a good job of making sure that we're keeping it separate, but still using it to help our Holy Cross guys as much as possible, which is really all you could ask for with it.
Take what we just talked about there with the state of Iowa. You have Iowa State with the tradition they have, but Grandview now has 9 NAIA championships. Wartburg has 14. So we just talked about 3 programs that have multiple national championships. And then you go to Louisiana. What's the culture like there versus Iowa for wrestling?
It's a little different. So the best way that I can describe it is, guys ask about it. So you grow up in Iowa, right? You're wrestling. Everybody, I mean, you go to any party, you go to any event, sporting event, anything in Iowa, someone sees you have cauliflower ear, right? And they're like, oh, hey, the first thing I do is, oh, I wrestled here, right? And I did this in wrestling. My son wrestled, my uncle. Everyone kind of knows at least what it is, right? And a lot of them have done it before. People see my ears here and they're like, what the heck happened to your ears? You know, and they don't even know what it is. And so I'm on campus I'll see, you know, a well put together kid, you know what I mean? He looks pretty athletic. I'm like, hey, you ever think about coming out for wrestling? It's like, wrestling, you mean like WWF? You know what I mean? And like, no, and you kind of explain it to them. That's just the biggest difference, is trying to introduce people to the sport. You know what I mean? One great thing about down here is the athletes, though. You know, I mean, man, it's crazy. The football programs you see here, the baseball programs, there's people that want to do it, right? And people are competitive. They want to win at it. So as long as you're willing to put the work in, you know, put the time in, meet the right people, you can surround yourself with the right people. But it's not like Iowa, right, where everyone wrestles, you know, 15,000 people at the state tournament. You kind of just got to navigate it a little differently. But I think it's coming around. You know, I think the culture, I think we're taking big steps. I mean, the traveling that we're doing, even with the administration. So up until last year, you weren't even allowed to go to club tournaments during high school season. So like the Super 32 tournaments like that were kind of just out for us, right? So then this year they allow us to do the exempt kind of Olympic sport thing. The Frost twins get to go to Super 32. We start putting some of these Louisiana dual teams together and traveling. And I think we're starting to put people on notice a little bit.
Is Daniel Cormier still a big deal down there?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So it was awesome for those Elite 8 duels that they had in Atlanta, which was probably one of, if not the coolest wrestling event I've ever seen, just as far as the percentage of talent, every single kid there was just an absolute hammer, right? And Daniel had 2 spots on his California team. And so he called us, and the Frost twins, 2 Louisiana boys, got to go up there to Georgia and compete with the Team California. Cali Customs is what they were called, and wrestle against, they wrestled against Minions, and they got to wrestle against Dynasty. They get to wrestle against all these teams as just, 2 kids from Louisiana. And that's an opportunity that DC gave him. So, I mean, he's still involved. He still does what he can. And yeah, he's a rock star for sure.
When you have a club like this, are you grassroots or are you looking for those elite kids?
You try to do both, right? I mean, you never want to be the club that's pushing out the beginner, right? The first kid, I mean, you never know. It's funny, if you look at, if we were to get a yearbook shot of all the NCAA champions, their senior year versus their first day of wrestling, it'd probably be pretty funny about how some of these guys, their first day of wrestling, they walk in and they might not look like a world beater, right? But all it takes is for someone to fall in love with the sport. So I think what we try to do is make sure that we have a session or we have a space for everybody. So if it's your first day wrestling and you play football and you play baseball and you want to wrestle too, and you have a few months out of the year, you know what I mean? We'll take you. Come on. And if you're the guy that wants to say, hey, my plan is to wrestle in college, I want to win national championships, I want to win state championships, then we have the ability to do that for you too. So I think that's the biggest thing that we try to take pride in is nobody's going to come in, right, and feel unwelcome, that this is too much for us, this level is too high. And on the other end of the spectrum, you definitely don't want a kid who comes in and says, I have big time goals. And we say, we can't help you with that. So I think that's one of the best things that we've done is we have a wide spectrum of it.
Have you always been in love with wrestling?
I've started super in love with it, right? And and I'm in love with it now. And there was a quote that I love. Jordan Burroughs said, he said, you've got to have the discipline, right, for those times that you don't necessarily love it, right? There's going to be times where it's hard, right? And it beats you up, and it's an unforgiving sport. The preparation that goes into it, right, as far as the drills and the weight cutting and the conditioning and everything like that, it's something that if you were doing it the right way, there's no way you're going to love every second of it, right? There's going to be those times where it's like, man, this just sucks. It's not easy. It feels like there's no end in sight. You know what I mean? It's just constant work, constant work, constant work. So you've got to always have that discipline in the back of your head where you do start wearing on yourself. That's what's going to push you through. But I mean, as far as love for the sport, there has been times, where I've kind of had some lull in my actual passion and love for it. When I got out of college, my first 2 years, got out of it immediately. I started working at Wells Fargo. I worked there for about a year. I got a job selling gold, like over the phone. So I was working in retirement accounts, stuff like that for, it was almost 2.5, 3 years that I was doing that. And when I first finished with college, I thought, okay, time to move on. What's the next step? You know what I mean? And I was living in Los Angeles, working, like I said, at this gold company, and it ended up not working out. So I left and I moved south down to Huntington Beach. And one of my really good buddies was like, hey, man, I know you're not really doing anything in your afternoons. Why don't you just come check it out, right? Come help the kids out. We have a pretty cool little club, and come see what we're doing. And I hadn't been in the room at that time in probably 2 years. And it was like, as soon as that first practice happened, I was just back in it. It was like my first day again, So I think you do. I think everybody goes through those ups and downs as far as actual love for it. But I mean, a wrestler is a wrestler, right? Once it's in your blood, it's not going anywhere.
Grandview has enhanced the prestige of winning an NAIA championship. Not saying that other programs haven't, but winning 9 in a row, potentially 10 in a row. It's a big deal to win a championship at Grandview. You started at Iowa State, won 2 NAIA championships. Do you feel as gratified winning those titles as you would have been winning an NCAA title?
I mean, the what ifs are always hard. Obviously, I mean, my goal from the time I was 8 years old, right? I mean, your goal is you want to be an NCAA Division I champion, right? That's what it is. You're watching, when you're watching it on TV, you're watching Penn State and you're watching Iowa and you're watching Iowa State. And that's when you're a little kid, that's what everyone wants, right? I think as I got older, you start actually appreciating just the actual act of wrestling, right? Of being on a team, of preparing your body, of going to battle, of having the guys next to you and behind you, and having your coaches. That's one thing that I try to explain to my high school guys is it's not D1 or bust, right? You're going to get what you get out of the sport is what you put into it, whether you're a Division I guy, whether you're an NAIA, D3, whatever it is. I think the great thing about it is there's always a way, especially in wrestling, there's always a way to get to that end goal, right? You look at a guy like Tervel, who came from Kearney, you know what I mean? You look at guys like that who might not have went the conventional route, but at the end of the day, they had that love for the sport. They had that passion to train. And I mean, especially when you have coaches like Mitchell and Reedy and guys like that, some of these coaches now that are in Division II and Division III, I mean, man, wrestling is so high level right now at all levels, from JUCO all the way to Division I. I think just having the opportunity to be able to compete for that long is something that I'll always be proud of.
All right, you're going to be able to chime in on this, and I'm not saying you're the final word, but you're an important word on this. Andy Hamilton and I have this ongoing debate. The question is it harder to win one match at the D1 NCAA championships on the championship side or win a non-D1 title, which you've done?
So it's going to depend on your weight. It's going to depend on where you're at. So if you look at a guy like Brock Gutches, right? You run into Brock Gutches, who is a 4-time NAIA champ. He transferred from Boise State. He wrestled in the Division I All-Star meet and held his own in there. You have a guy like that. You run into him first round of the national championships. That's about who you're running into first round of NCAAs. You have a guy like Cam Tassari, right, who wrestled at Lindsey Wilson. That was a Division I All-American at Ohio State. Eric Thompson won an NAIA championship. I think it was like a month later, he wrestled the guy from Minnesota that made the finals in D1s and beat him in a freestyle match, you know? So I think, I mean, obviously you look at depth and it's not close, but you're going to run into those guys in any level, no matter what it is, that there's buzzsaws, you know? So me personally, I'm always taking the hardware. Give me the national championship for sure. You know what I mean? Over the win, I'm taking hardware every time. But I also don't want it to go unsaid that, I mean, there's legitimate world class. I mean, Brandon Wright, I mean, that guy made a national team, you know what I mean? Not even 2 years after he graduated from Grandview. So I think that there's always going to be that top level talent in whatever division you're in, but I'm taking the hardware.
Final question for you, Ryak. Just give us the landscape of Louisiana right now. Are you going to have a state championship? What's the protocol? Take us through that.
So the plan right now, as far as we know, is it's all pedal to the metal as far as having a state tournament. They're putting some things into place as far as not letting, I mean, literally the rule came out today, so it's still some gray area that we're trying to figure out. But apparently our 14 starters, aren't supposed to compete in any club level or high school level tournaments, whether it's in Louisiana or outside of Louisiana, until the state tournament. So, I mean, it's right there. You can tell that the LHSAA is trying to do what they can to have a state tournament. So, I mean, you've got to be thankful for that, especially with seeing how some of the states have handled it, right? And just cutting the head off the whole thing and seeing we'll see you next year. I mean, we have the Frost brothers who are looking. I mean, they could be one of the first, probably, I know it's the first twin brothers. I think it's the first brothers to ever win 4 state championships before they end that state tournament, right? And that's out. We have our seniors. I mean, we have guys that have been right there, 5th, 3rd, 2nd, that, you know, that's their dream. That's what they wake up and think about every day, is that state tournament. So you don't want to go all the way and say, hey, no tournament, no nothing, move on to the next. So it would be really easy to be mad about that. But the fact that we're having a tournament, it's just something that we've got to take in stride, you know what I mean? Do what we can and kind of just keep moving forward.
I know I said that was the last question or last line I think, but I got to add one more. You got to give me either the craziest thing Nick Mitchell has done or a great Nick Mitchell story.
Oh man, put me on the spot.
And while you're thinking, let's just make sure everyone knows that Nick Mitchell's head wrestling coach at Grandview. He's going for his record 10th NAIA championship in a row. So we'll tee that up, and hopefully during that little introduction, it gives you enough time to give us a story.
Yeah, so I think my favorite, and So it was tough. So when I first transferred to Grandview, the first match on Grandview's schedule that year was Iowa State at Ames, right? And so that was something that when I had first went over there, I kind of already knew that, and that was something that I already thought, and I immediately circled on my calendar, right? I didn't end up transferring till after school had started, so I lost my first semester of eligibility. I couldn't be wrestling varsity till my second semester. So I'm go to Ames, right? And I watch, I don't know if you remember the freaking barn burner that Grandview and Iowa State had that year. And it was my old teammates who friends to this day, right? Some of my best friends wrestling against my new teammates again. Some of my best friends to this day. So it was crazy just kind of watching it and being a part of that. And you're in the stands, right? And everyone's like, oh my gosh, Grandview just lost. I think it was 3 or 4 points. Grandview just lost by one match, right? Grandview they almost beat them. They're saying all these things. And we go to the locker room, and that was the first thing that Mitchell said was people are going to tell you that this was, this is a win. This was something that we were proud of, and unless every single guy top to bottom, all 10 weight classes can say that you fought from first whistle to last whistle, it's just not good enough, right? And it was the first he had in practice, that was his theory, right? Is it's not wins, it's not losses, it's not records, it's 7 minutes whistle to whistle of fight, of effort. It's every practice from the start of practice to the end of practice, it's effort. And that was the first thing he was conveying to us. And I think a lot of guys walked into the locker room and they were feeling kind of like, oh, wow, we just almost beat a Division I team. And that wasn't what it was about. It was that there was some guys that the effort wasn't there. And you're going to have to double check. I'm pretty sure that that's the last duel that he lost, that would have been in 2014. I think that was the last time he's lost from then till now. And so to see him, it's easy that coaches have these things that they tell you, right? Oh, it's about effort. Oh, it's about fight. It's about this, this, and this. Him in the shiningest moment that he could have, sat on his laurels and been happy about a result, he's still stuck to what he was preaching to us, right? You practice what you preach. And to see somebody do that at that level when you're in Hilton Coliseum and you're an NAIA coach, for him to still do that, I think I took that with me for the rest of my life. Up until now, even with my kids, it's real easy to sit and yell at a kid that loses and praise a kid that wins, right? It's easy to do that. But if you can make sure that you're pushing that effort, that fight, and that's what it's about, not just on the mat, right, in the classroom, in life, and everything you're doing, I think that was when it really sunk into me that I was in the right place. So I think that's my favorite Mitchell story, was right after that Iowa State duel.
Perfect way to end. Thanks for sharing that, and thanks for this time. Hopefully we have a full Louisiana State Championships. Let's hope for that. But thanks for sharing your story. Look forward to seeing you on the road.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for having me, Kyle. You take care, man.